Hello, I am Helle from Estonia, and I have. Can you hear me? Yes? Good. I have studied some theoretical physics and some ayahuasca psychology, and I will tell you about some connections between those things. In altered states of consciousness, people often visit so-called other worlds. They say they visit other realms with other beings, and one ayahuasca user said, "I cannot live in innocent oblivion about other worlds or be certain about ordinary reality because I have experienced totally different worlds. And those experiences are much more intense than everyday experiences. They have been even more intense than this reality here. Such experiences are really hard to describe, as probably most of you know, but people try nevertheless. Every culture has had their own vocabulary and traditions to describe those extraordinary experiences. And our modern science-based tribe is not an exception. What has been described as spirit worlds, heaven and hell, underworld, upper worlds, is described in nowadays often in terms borrowed from theoretical physics or science in general. I had a collection of texts and did some content analysis on this, and some of the codes were very familiar to me from my theoretical physics studies. There were energies, vibrations, high or low, frequencies, activations of positive or negative energy, unified common field, transformation, quantum jumps. All this vocabulary was familiar for me from my theoretical physics studies. And it was familiar for me from advertisements of those spiritual or meditation retreats in New Age style, where you go and pay some 500 euros and get some quantum transformation for it. Actually, the collection of texts was descriptions of experiences of 30 ayahuasca users. I asked them about their first, last, best, worst, usual experiences, got some descriptions, and made some content analysis on this, and I got a big amount of those science jargon words. Actually, if I made a content analysis on our conference booklet, probably I would find some of these also. There was something about quantum jumps and Planck lengths and so on. So it is not at all unusual in psychedelic world. However, when I read those sentences as a whole, not like counting my codes, they didn't make any sense from point of physics or natural sciences at all. And this is what I call religious or spiritual use of scientific terminology or scientific vocabulary. So this scientific terminology was used creatively to label and invoke feelings and images that we associate with power of nature, science, and technology. It reminded me of film about African cargo cult, where, for example, one important man of the tribe was presenting a truck driver having a huge branch of tree behind him, dragging it along. They had built airplanes from wood and grass, and they were doing a ritual that they had been seen in white people. And eventually some of them went into trance, had some altered states of consciousness without using any psychedelics, and afterwards they told the anthropologist who made this movie about them that they have been healed from diseases, they got their relationship issues resolved. So this new age use of scientific vocabulary reminded me of that cargo cult. And then I got an idea that maybe the nowadays contemporary neo-shamanic ceremonies are also an example of religious use of natural science system. We have seen those ceremonies, participated in them. We take our impressions of that, dismiss large part of Dieta and Icarus, take some elements, combine them in some creative way as we feel right, and do this ceremony and call this shamanism. We have some magnificent experiences. We get healed, transformed, but maybe there is some bigger system behind that, much more precise and definite, how these things are connected for those indigenous people that we do not know anything about. I don't know. So, what I saw in those descriptions of psychedelic experiences was this creative or religious use of scientific vocabulary. But this scientific knowledge can also enrich our psychedelic experience. This information highway from altered state of consciousness to our ordinary consciousness. This is not a one-way street. In large amount, I guess, these experiences, what we have in those wonderful moments, consist not only of messages from spirits or molecules, but also the contents of our everyday experiences, like our dreams contain many elements of our everyday experiences. And when our ordinary everyday consciousness contains wonderful elements from natural science, like supernova, black holes, infinite energy of empty space, those images can also appear in our psychedelic journeys and make them richer and more enjoyable and more awe-inspiring. However, apparently ayahuasca doesn't help one to make scientific discoveries, which would hold to the tests of experimental control. So if you have revelations about scientific truths about particles, cosmology under ayahuasca, so maybe it's not a wise idea to start telling scientists about how they should do this science, unless you are a well-educated, prepared physicist working on those problems. Then maybe it could increase creativity and give you some good ideas about physics. So we cannot really get much good science from taking psychedelics, but scientific knowledge can be a beautiful source of metaphors. For example, one of those persons in my ayahuasca study said that in my ordinary state of consciousness, I am an individual person, like photon or electron, I'm a person, but with ayahuasca, I'm the wave of the universal consciousness. Beautiful metaphor from particle-wave duality known from quantum mechanics, and not any pseudoscience or cultural appropriation of our nerd culture by New Age psychonauts at all. Some words about ayahuasca that I have mentioned many times. Probably most of you know that this is a psychedelic tea from Amazonian plants that is used ritually in shamanic, neo-shamanic, new spirituality and religious contexts. It is made from 2 plants, most usually Banisteriopsis capi, that is the proper ayahuasca liana that defines the ayahuasca. If there is no capi, it should not be called ayahuasca. There are analogs, and Psychotria viridis or Rainia in our Santo Daime religion, where I'm a member of, so I'm out of the psychedelic closet, because the church is fully legal for more than 20 years in Netherlands. I have no problem of coming out of psychedelic closet about it. So those 2 plants combine the force from hormonal alkaloids and light or dimethyltryptamine for Psychotria viridis. Their interaction in human body leads to this mirasao or psychedelic experience. Ayahuasca is mostly used ritually in ceremonies under guidance of experienced shamans or leaders. People do it in groups, gathered together in some country house to have this experience together with singing and leading. The shaman will lead the ceremony with their singing, and before the ceremony there is some mental and physical preparation, the dieta. After the ceremony there is some sharing, integration, sometimes even something like psychotherapy going on, depending on how organizers do it. And what I did was I did a little psychological study for my master's thesis in psychology in Estonia about mental health, personality and quality of life of ayahuasca users. I couldn't give people any ayahuasca for obvious reasons. Ayahuasca is still in grey legal zone in Estonia, and I estimated that I will not get the necessary permits from ethics committee. But after half a year of combat with ethics committee, I got a permit to give those people some questionnaires, to make some tests and interviews with a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist who didn't know if this person was from ayahuasca group or control group. And this was also a replication of good big studies done in Brazil, which conclusively showed that long-time ayahuasca users, those people who have used ayahuasca for at least 15 years, at least twice a month, are mostly healthy and happy, and in some extent happier and healthier than control group who didn't use ayahuasca. And this was also a social experiment of starting ayahuasca or psychedelic research in a university and in a country where nobody was doing any psychedelic research at all. I wanted to see how my supervisors, professors will react when I will say, I want to study ayahuasca. Mostly they said, Helle, you better do something reasonable. Then I said, I'm not so young anymore to do things that I'm not really deeply interested in. If not now, then never. So I will do everything to get it. So I asked about 10 people if they agreed to supervise my topic, and they more or less politely declined. But there was a good researcher, Kairi Kregibu, who had mercy on me, and so I got all necessary permits, and I got this done. And my research questions were, who are ayahuasca users in Estonia, what kind of people they are, how they describe the experience and its effects on their life, their mental health, personality, and quality of life. I had 30 ayahuasca users, half of them men, mostly middle-aged, of diverse spirituality, not all members of the same church, like you can get hundreds of them in Brazil, but they had used ayahuasca at least once in their life, and 30 control people matched by gender, age, and education. I asked them about their ayahuasca experiences via some questionnaires and hallucinogen rating scale, and investigated their mental health and personality through some psychometric tests and an interview with a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist who didn't know from which group the person was. What I got was a big variety of experiences. I hope to get some kinds of results that over time, with experience, the experience will be more pleasant, less difficult, and you will learn more or less from it. But instead, I got a big variation. There was a slight tendency to have somewhat less difficult experiences with more ceremonies experienced, but this effect didn't reach statistical significance. So actually, people had very different experience, and during the same ceremony, even they could have like experiences of heaven or hell. So some of them marked both extremely pleasant and extremely difficult about the same ceremony. I asked about had they had some mental health effects from their ayahuasca use, positive or negative. There were some problems mentioned about emotional ability or being out of balance for 2 weeks after the ceremony if the process was not properly finished. And this difficulty to communicate and understand those experiences, for what science vocabulary is next loophole through which we can squeeze those wonderful experiences into minds of other people. But there were much more reported positive subjective effects. There were more of them about psychological healing, improving status of relationship, increasing creativity, appreciating more life. One of them said, "Thanks to Aya, I am alive." A person who had quite difficult experiences had in her personal life. And discovering new levels of consciousness, new worlds that they couldn't imagine, beyond all imagination, so they said. But about, do those benefits translate, those subjective benefits translate into some objective benefits? This was tested by this mental health assessment with recognized psychometric tools, and I found no abuse, no addiction to ayahuasca, no big surprise, taking into account what has been found in big, good studies in Brazil. They were not stupid and they were not crazy, and the indicators of their anxiety and depression were lower than in the control group. So their personality had lower neuroticism, higher openness and agreeability, so like no personality disorders. And I asked about their life satisfaction, how satisfied are they with their life. They were more satisfied than the control group, and the same about how happy they were about their life. The effect remained statistically significant even after controlling for income that was somewhat higher in the ayahuasca group for maybe different reasons. So those ayahuasca users seem to be mostly healthy and happy. My social experiment in initiating psychedelic research in my country and in my university was successful. I got my thesis defended, I got a B. So, like everything, well. But thinking scientifically, and it's known already among researchers of ayahuasca, that as my sample was self-selected, I asked people to come into my study among people who go to ceremonies. So my good results do not necessarily represent the whole population. So if we give ayahuasca first time to random people, they might not like it as much as people who are returning many times to have this experience. So don't be surprised if your friends who try it first time don't like it at all or don't get any subjective benefits from it. So I used to clarify about this self-selection that is often mentioned in articles about it, but not really quantitatively estimated. I used my physics education and made a mathematical model of an ayahuasca community where some people have mean tendency to get good effects, subjective benefits from ayahuasca. Some people tend to get negative effects. I assumed a Gaussian distribution, a normal distribution of those central tendencies, and I also assumed for each single one-time experience to be normally distributed around this personal mean. And I assumed that people will return if they had a good experience or subjective benefits from the ceremonies, and they will not return, or the probability of them returning will be less when they had not so good experiences. Also, what I put in was symmetric, no preference for good or bad experiences, as symmetric mean zero, both for the good and the bad side of it. So in my model was a village of 10,000 people. Sessions were held twice a month, like they do in Santo Daime Church and in many places in Brazil. People had basic random probability to participate in a single session 1/1000, and the plus proportional to accumulated subjective effect, the probability to return. The probability diminished when the effect was negative, the accumulated effect of all experiences, previous experiences of that person, or it increased the probability to return if it was positive. And what I got after 360 seasons in community, it represents almost 15 years, was there were minority practice with substantial risks. There were some people, this is a row, variation row of all people from the worst experience to the best experiences. There is a line of zero, so negative summary subjective effect is here. There were people who got negative effects up to 4.5 standard deviation. That is a lot. So there were some people who were traumatized, but this negative effect was self-limiting, so they didn't return to ceremonies, and that was it. They once visited, had a bad effect, maybe tried once later, had nothing better also, so they quit and they didn't appear there in the ceremonies anymore. Most people just did not appear, didn't happen to participate in the ceremony. But there was a minority who had like enormous benefit due to this runaway process. You get a good effect, you return for more, you get a good effect again, you return for more. It was like until 800 standard deviation. To fit it into my laptop screen, it should be 8 meters high, so above the ceiling. So this comparably simple model got some plausible results. So to summarize, this psychedelic use will be a minority thing. Positive results found in those studies of long-term users do not necessarily apply to first-time users from general population. This religious use of scientific vocabulary is a spiritual practice, not science, so you maybe will not make important scientific discoveries recognized by PhD tribe just from taking psychedelics. But methods of science are useful to understand psychedelics. We have these brain imaging studies, biochemistry, mathematical modeling that helps to do good research on psychedelics, that helps towards legalizing them, and scientific knowledge can enrich our psychedelic journeys. If we have physics in our mind, it will come with us into our journeys, make them more beautiful, and enrich this great mystery and help us to appreciate it even more. Thank you.